I want to talk to Zion in California, she, her. Zion wanted to see what apostate prophets' thoughts were on the right to return to land that was stolen and taken by Islam. I don't know if I read that right, but Zion, what are you talking about? Give us some examples.
What are you talking
Okay.
about?
What are you
Thank you for
talking about?
having me on air.
Thank you for calling.
Hi, apostate prophet. I
Hi.
have been waiting to talk to you, so it makes me really happy I get to finally speak with you. I know you from David Wood and Sam Shimon since I'm a Christian, and so I usually am on that side of YouTube. So it's really good to talk to you finally. But earlier on, you had a caller from Israel talking about Jewish people's right to return back to the land that was once colonized and taken over by Muslims. And I just thought, why don't we apply that same logic to all the countries that were colonized by Muslims? Why is it only that Jewish people in Israel has to feel guilty for going back to the land that was originally theirs? There have been hundreds of countries that have been taken over by Muslims, right? And quite frankly, the only country that I can think of that actually gained their independence from Islamic colonization is Spain. I don't know if any other country has been able to do that. I mean, after 300 years of Islamic colonization, they kicked them out, and now they're independent of that. But other than that, everybody else is still under the bootstraps of Muslims, and they have not been able to kick them out. So just because the Jews were the second country to be successful in kicking out Israel, why should they have to feel guilty? Why aren't the Persians going back to Persia? Why aren't the Iraqis going back to their homeland? They used to be Babylonians and Mesopotamians. Why aren't the Sudanese going back to being Kushites? Why aren't the Somalians back to Somalia, Pakistan?
Like thousands of years ago, Zion.
Yeah.
I mean, no. I'm not going back to Germany and Poland. Okay? I don't speak any of those languages. But anyway, the question wasn't for me. And also,
I don't want to go
out.
back to. I don't want to go back to Central Asia somewhere and live in the steppes of Russia, wherever it is now.
I don't want to go back to Africa, and as I don't speak any of the countries in Africa. Zion, are you talking about creating ethno-states?
No, I'm not. But I am saying, why is Israel being criticized for going back to their homeland?
I get it.
When all they did was overthrow Islam. But Muslims are going around colonizing and have taken it over everybody's land. Like, that land does not belong to Palestinians. Just like Iran doesn't belong to Muslims. Somalia doesn't belong to Muslims. And yet we're only criticizing Israel because they were successful. If Spain was doing that today, we will criticize them too for overthrowing Islam. But they just happened to do it back then, right? They didn't do it in 1948. They did
Zion, thank you so much. Thank you so much, and thank you for your very nice words. I really appreciate it, and nice to talk to you, by the way. Here's what I think, to be very, very honest, and I know a lot of people might disagree with me on my stance regarding Israel and Palestine. I believe that, as I said, the region that we call Palestine and the region that we call Israel nowadays was part of an empire that was conquered a very long time ago, over 1,000 years ago, by the Islamic Empire. And before the British took it over, it was still a part of an empire of the Ottoman Empire that was the Islamic Empire. That was what they were considering themselves. They were the leaders, the sword of Islam. They lost the land. The British took it over. They decided to. The Jewish people wanted a home for themselves. A lot of them went to the region, and migrating there and establishing the state was foremost not a religious idea. It was a secular idea. Actually, the Zionists, the modern Zionists, were secular people. They were not highly religious people. I would say, as far as I see it, I agree with you from a certain aspect, that it was land that was taken as a result of a war. It was land that was managed by the part of the war that captured this land, and this this party which captured the land wanted to establish a land for both people, the British Empire. They couldn't manage it. They collapsed. They left it alone to the people. They said, do whatever you want. You can establish separate states. The Jews accepted it and established their own state. The Arabs did not accept it and started fighting, and so on. Over the century, many wars happened. Many of them were aggressive against Israel. Israel defended itself. Israel, as a result of wars, took land, occupied land, and so on. I would say by the same standards that we judge the Islamic empires in history and in recent history, Israel has all right to the land that it conquered as a result of these wars that happened. It has all the right to keep the lands that it has annexed, and it has even the right to manage those parts of the region that Israel has occupied, because it happened as a result of wars, and that is how things worked forever. That is how the Islamic empires, including how the Ottoman Empire, conquered lands forever. You mentioned Iberia, Spain, and you mentioned now Israel. There are other parts of the world too. For example, Greece was under Ottoman occupation for centuries, freed themselves. Serbia was under Ottoman occupation. The current Turkey, Anatolia, is a result of Turkic people coming and conquering the land and Islamicizing it. So, if we want to talk about the root cause of all these things, we could argue about them forever. If we want to talk about whether the Hebrew people, the Israelites, or the Israelis today are right or wrong, we could talk about this forever. The issue is, I will not solve the problem. I will just give my dumb opinion, my unimportant, my humble opinion about this matter, that the parties in this conflict will not take seriously, and it will not solve the conflict. I believe that this is a conflict that has a lot of religious innuendo and a lot of religious motivation and powers behind it, a lot of global political powers behind it. I can just make up my opinion about this whole issue, but it will not really matter to the ongoing conflict, which is why I try to, be more reserved about what's actually going on. If you want to have my personal opinion, this is it. But we can talk about this forever. I just never really see an end to this discussion.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, Zion, but I just don't see that the mechanisms by which we would excise from a lot of different countries the people whose ancient ancestors moved to those countries. I just don't see that being a very humanitarian process. And I don't think it's realistic to expect. I mean, you're right. Was it Isabella and Ferdinand? Is that right? In Spain, booted out the caliphate in Spain. I've been to Granada to their burial tomb or whatever. Jolly good.
Reconquista was
Reconquista, and that's kind of what it would look like. But no, that's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. I think the best we can look at now is that we have people of many different ethnic heritages in all over the world. And as a person of the earth, I want to make sure that I'm supporting countries that are being supportive of their people, that they can have. The reality is we have a diverse world. We have countries. Each country is diverse in its ethnicity. We don't have monocultures really outside of, maybe even Japan is probably the most monolithic in its culture, but even that is quite diverse. And so kicking the Muslims out of Morocco, I just don't see it.
No. I know. You misunderstood me. I'm not talking about doing that. I'm just saying we're talking about criticism, and Israel is receiving all the criticism. And I'm saying if we're going to, obviously I understand, because I'm an immigrant myself. I come from a land where Muslims literally took over. What I am saying, and I know it's not feasible that we can't just start shipping people off to their original land. I understand. That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
All right. What I'm saying is, since we're talking about criticisms and everybody, getting heaps of coals on their head, I'm like, just be fair and also heap the coal on Muslims' head when they went around colonizing and taking lands that did not belong to them. Israel should not be the one that has to sit there and say,
Okay.
The coal on their
Okay.
head for taking
Zion, I think I get your point. I think I get your point. I think I get your point, and I think what I'm going to say here is this: that when the Muslims conquered various parts of North Africa and various parts of the Middle East, and even unto Spain, that was a long, long, long time ago. And when they did it not through peaceful negotiation necessarily. They did it with the sword and the arrow, and by taking over and supplanting the ruling class of the people who lived there and subjected them to religious practices that were not of their own land. And when Israel bulldozes down live living people's homes in the West Bank and does not divert resources to a country that they control in a large part, a part of the country that they control the economics of, that these are happening right now in the world that we live in right now. And so I can go and shake my finger at Saudi Arabia for something that its ancestors spin-offs did 1,000 years ago, or I can say, hey, Israel, what the hell are you doing over there in the West Bank? Okay, maybe stop expanding, maybe make sure you're taking care of all of the people in your country, even those who don't agree with you politically. And I can do that, and I can I think I willing to hear arguments for why Israeli expansion into the West Bank, into existing communities where people live and are trying to just live, independent of who threw what rock and who launched what missile. I think I can criticize everybody. I think I've got enough criticism to go around. But you know what? We got to move on.
Zion,
Yeah.
If it makes you feel better,
Yeah.
I don't judge the Israelis for the initial idea of Zionism at all.
Yeah.
At all. And when it comes to the current things that are happening, I reserve the right not to have an opinion on that very much in public. So but I thank you so much for calling.
Yeah. The idea of a homeland is not objectionable. I think I just want to see it practiced better.